Nirvana is openly shown to our eyes. This earth where we stand is the pure lotus land, and this very body, the body of Buddha. This is the 5th day of this January 1982 7-day sesshin. And we'll just start reading this one very famous section from Hakuin's writings. It's taken from the book The Zen Master Hakuin by Yampolsky. And it deals with hara, being that area of the body, the lower abdomen, all the way around to the back. Doesn't matter what it all includes. It's that area in which you yourself lived for 9 months before you were born. And when the baby's born, that's where the baby breathes. It's very much alive there. It's the area of the diaphragm which participates in inhalation and exhalation to varying degrees. If you study voice, you want to become a singer, at least old-fashioned singer, I don't know how it is with new-fashioned singers, you work very hard with this area there. Your teacher keeps telling you, support your voice, don't sing from your throat. You got to support, you have to support. And you begin feeling that there's something down there which goes in and out and which really can support the voice. So it carries, you don't need a microphone. In the martial arts, all these different things of judo and aikido, karate and bow and arrow shooting, whatever it's archery. This area becomes very vital to function. One functions from that hara. And sometimes some of these wrestlers who wrestle but a fraction of a second and the match is over. These Japanese huge wrestlers, it is nothing but wrestling haras almost. One saw a TV show of a sumi painter, sumi master. A lot of these arts or ceramics, they're done in kneeling. And maybe this has to do with the functioning of the hara. There's obviously a lot of hara the way he was using his brush. If these abdominal respiratory muscles do participate in the breathing, then it's possible for the mind to quiet down. It's possible. It may go hand in hand. It may not. But the fact is there is no brain down here. And if one can question the mu or the hu, or have the breathing come from down there, there is a new functioning of the body coming into being, of the body-mind, which everyone can experience for oneself. If there is energy and energizing, a coming to life and vitality down here. It's possible to act in a quiet manner. The brain being active, meaning awake, alert, and yet not just buzzing in confusion. It can be, the feeling is, it can be short-circuited, at least this cerebral cortex, which supplies all the association, all the old information, without even being asked to do it. It's triggered by the minutest stimulus, and there comes the barrage. How does this area come to life? Can't really say. If you make a deliberate practice out of it, well, I wouldn't use sesshin for it, but one can do it at times. I remember these endless drives back and forth to Rochester to do something down there, to breathe down there. Of course, having had previous voice training, there was something there. The counting, the breathing, the mu, the hu. Can that work take place down there? Not knowing down here where it's dark. And yet where strength, tremendous strength, can accumulate and gather. So let's just read these few lines from Hakuin, which he himself learned, picked up from an old Taoist sage who was between 100 and 200 years old. He sought him out in the mountains one day when he was so ill. Zen sickness, he called it. And this old hermit told him of this, what he called contemplation. The area below my navel, down to my loins and the sole of my feet, is all Joshu's mu. What principle can this mu possibly have? The area below my navel, down to my loins and the soles of my feet, is all my original face. Where can there be nostrils in this original face? Nostrils, breathing through the nostrils. Can the breathing take place down here? But nostrils also means in Zen writing where an ox or an animal is led by. The nostrils are pierced and then you're led by someone else. Where can there be nostrils in this original face? The area below my navel, down to my loins and the soles of my feet, is all the pure land of my own mind. With what can this pure land be adorned? The area below my navel, down to my loins and the soles of my feet, is all the Buddha Amida in my own body. What truth can this Amida preach? The area below my navel, down to my loins and the soles of my feet, is all the village where I was born. What news can there be from this village? Another translation, it says, What letter is needed from that home? What news or letters are needed when you're in touch? Directly. Actually, the beginnings as Zen instructions are to keep the mind in the palm of the left hand. It's that area where the hands touch. But once this area comes to life, then there's no inside or outside. It's one whole area of energy. The palm of the left hand is mentioned so one doesn't start ruminating about what that point is inside there. It's easier to become aware of the palm of the left hand. And yet in doing this zazen, in sitting, sometimes something drops on its own, without any intention, without any volitional practice, cutting out conceptual steps in between, which is always the danger. To think, what do I have down here? I must think about that. I must make myself a map of it. Then you're up here, in your map-making brain. This is why there's a danger to trying to do this, to bring your mind down there, or to do this deliberately. And yet at times to observe, how do I breathe? Is there something down here? And you can feel it. And the inhalation, the belly just extending, filling up with air, and the exhalation, there being some slight something or other. Intonation, energizing, vitalizing of this area. Don't want to use too many words. It's not, the word is not the thing. So much for hara. We're going to read some of the Bassui letters from the Three Pillars of Zen. I was going to start with one which we've read before when I came across this one, which we've never read before. It's short and it's sort of autobiographical. We won't go into Bassui's very interesting biography. We've done it other times. It takes usually a teisho and a half. There are tapes about this if you want to hear that. This one is letter number 6 to a monk in Shobo Hermitage at his urgent request. And Bassui writes, "In my boyhood, this question perplexed me. Aside from this physical body, what replies I am so-and-so when asked, who are you, or who are you? I'm so-and-so. What replies? This perplexity having once arisen, it became deeper year by year, resulting in my desire to become a monk. Then I made the solemn vow. Now that I have determined to be a monk, I cannot search for truth for my own sake. Even after winning the supreme truth, I will defer Buddhahood until I have saved every sentient beings. Furthermore, until this perplexity has been dissolved, I will not study Buddhism or learn the rituals and practices of a monk. So long as I live in the human world, I will stay nowhere except with great Zen masters and in the mountains." Let's say something about this solemn vow he made. Now that I have determined to be a monk, I cannot search for truth for my own sake. Even after winning the supreme truth, I will defer Buddhahood. Footnote says that is the highest, perfected state, until I have saved every sentient being, which is the vow of a bodhisattva, says the footnote. At this time, Bassui had not seen into the truth of himself. He made this vow. I wonder what he understood or meant when he said, I will defer Buddhahood. We hear this mentioned and read it. A bodhisattva is one who defers Buddhahood until he has saved every last sentient being. What is this Buddhahood that is being deferred? The Buddha must have reached Buddhahood. But the Buddha absolutely declined whenever asked what happens to a saint after he dies. This question was asked many times, and he did not answer it. Probably considered it totally irrelevant to this work, which has to go on right now, speculating about what happens to Buddhas after they die, which does not keep human beings from speculating. The Buddha himself spent 40 years or more walking around, talking to people, whoever wanted to listen to him. Was he deferring Buddhahood? When one says, I will defer Buddhahood, what does one say? Why does one say it? Does one mean I will defer sort of finding a realm of peace with no further involvement? A Buddha realm? There is talk and writing about Buddha realms, which supposedly contain Buddhas. Buddhas live there. What do they do there? Do they do remote saving? I'm really not trying to ridicule, I'm asking. What do they do there? It's not so different from the Christian heaven where God and Christ and the Holy Ghost abide. Sort of helping from there, if you believe in them. Maitreya, the future Buddha, is supposed to be right now in the Tushita heaven. Where's that? There were some jokes made at the time the first space capsules went up about not finding any heavens and gods. Maybe they're further out. Are they geographical areas? This, I will defer Buddhahood until I've saved all sentient beings. How does one save one sentient being? Save from what? Someone comes to you and says, I'm in terrible agony. I'm in unbearable pain and sorrow. Please save me. From what? From that agony and sorrow and pain? How can you save a person? Or can one just point out what may be the origin of agony, pain, and sorrow? And then everyone has to see this for oneself. That trying to get rid of it is not the saving. Comforting is not the saving. The Buddha never comforted anybody. So that cannot be meant by saving. To speak to someone, to work with someone, to look at something together. Is that saving? And what is being deferred while this is being done? Can one defer one's own clear seeing? One's own impartiality? For a later time, but right now I'm going to go about this business of saving? That doesn't make sense, does it? The idea of saving, does that do something to one? If so, there's a motive in there, isn't there? A motive to get a little bit of fulfillment out of this for oneself. Which is the continuation of self-seeking of all human beings. Can one afford to defer anything? If it's meant comfort or bliss or being in a realm of no problems and no work. But is that what Buddhahood means? Other than that, doesn't there have to be clarity and wholeness, or else there cannot be any work of this kind going on? Which doesn't mean one never makes a mistake. Can it be seen? Can self-seeking and partiality be seen and not deferred until later? At a moment of there being no me, you, sentient being, and suffering being, and myself. Where is there room for the idea of deferring or attaining Buddhahood? Isn't this all thinking? Part of this whole interminable thought process? Process of speculation? And yet, there is something to this feeling of needing to do something with people, together. Is that a vow? Does it need to be a vow? Or does it come naturally? When the eyes and ears and the heart is open. to hear and see and feel what's going on. This further vow, I will not study Buddhism or learn the rituals and practices of a monk. Bassui had an aversion against monasteries and the ongoings of a monastery, in a monastery. We don't know what went on in his times, but there's something in the introduction which says, for the ceremonial rites of a monk or priest, he had little use, believing that a monk should live a simple life, dedicated to attaining the highest truth, so as to lead others to liberation, and not engage in ceremony and luxurious living. Not to mention political intrigue, to which the priesthood of his day was only too prone. On his numerous pilgrimages, he stubbornly refused to remain even overnight in the temple, but insisted on staying in some isolated hut high up on a hill or mountain, where he would sit hour after hour doing zazen away from the distractions of the temple. So strong was Bassui's distaste for the ceremonialism of the temple that many years later, after he had become master of Kogakuji, he always insisted on calling it Kogaku-an instead of the suffix an, meaning hermitage, as opposed to the more grandiose ji, meaning temple or monastery. And here he continues in the letter, after I entered a monastery, my perplexity increased. At the same time, a strong resolve arose from the bottom of my heart, and I thought, Shakyamuni Buddha has passed already, and Miroku, that's Maitreya, the future Buddha, has not yet appeared. During this period, when authentic Buddhism has declined to the point where it is about to expire, may my desire for self-realization be strong enough to save all sentient beings in this Buddhaless world. And the footnote here, at the word expire, during this period when authentic Buddhism has declined to the point where it is about to expire, the footnote says, like many others of his time, Bassui believed, and this has been written in sutras, Bassui believed he was in the beginning of the period of the destruction of the true Dharma as prophesied by the Buddha himself, the true law, which is Dharma, as prophesied by the Buddha himself. In the such and such sutra, the such and such sutra quotes the Buddha as saying that in the first 500 years after his parinirvana, his disciples would attain emancipation according to the right law. In the second 500, they would only be sure of attaining samadhi. In the third 500, of reading and reciting the sutras. In the fourth 500, of building temples and pagodas. And in the fifth 500, of the destruction of the Dharma. If the date of the Buddha's parinirvana is accepted as around 476 BC, Bassui's birth in 1327 would have been within the fourth period. Of course, all these sutras were written. The first ones were written about 200 or 300 years after the Buddha's death, but more and more were written and recorded, all these Mahayana sutras, after the turn of the century, after the birth of Christ, and always new interpretations and new editions. It's a vast, complex structure of writing, this Buddhism. And thinking. Not without speculation. So here Bassui believed that this was next to the most declining age of Buddhism, so he better work hard. Even should I suffer the pangs of everlasting hell as a result of the sin of attachment to saving, so long as I can shoulder the sufferings of sentient beings, I will never become discouraged or forsake this eternal vow. This vow, this being so strong, probably came out of a deep, deep feeling of the sorrow of human beings, which went way past his own personal problems and his own personal sorrow or pain. Furthermore, in practicing Zen, I will not idle away my time thinking of life and death, or waste even a minute in trifling good works. Discern the difference between trifling good works and the work that needs to be done on oneself and together with others. They're not two. Nor will I blind others to the truth by trying to minister to them, so long as my own strength is insufficient to lead them to self-realization. And he waited very long. He always escaped from would-be followers and disciples to another mountain. These resolutions became part and parcel of my thinking, bothering me to some extent in my zazen, but I could not do otherwise. I constantly prayed to Buddhas for strength to carry out these resolutions, which I made the standard of my conduct in both favorable and unfavorable circumstances, under the watchful but friendly eyes of heavenly beings. There are 2 footnotes here. Under I constantly prayed, it says petitionary prayer is not unknown in Zen. One may think that prayer is only known in such religions as Christianity, but there's praying going on in Zen to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, very similar to other religions. One must not think that Buddhism is so different. It isn't different because human beings are all alike in their needs and wants and fears of loneliness and aloneness and abandonment and insufficiency. Can one be in touch with that rather than clinging to a superstructure on top of that? The structure is always fragile and perishable. It's always in the danger of collapsing, as the sutras themselves have predicted, or the Buddha. Don't cling to my teachings, they're going to disintegrate. Because they're put together by thinking. They're words. And words is not the real thing. What's the real thing? When you have no words and no prayers, and you're thrown upon yourself. Like someone thrown into the water, either learning to swim on the instant or drowning. friendly eyes of heavenly beings, it says devas. They're supposed to be heavenly beings in the realm of the heavens, like similar to our angels and guardian angels. And then Bassui finishes the letter. It is really pointless to tell you about these delusive states of mind. But as you make bold to ask, I write here of my aspirations as a novice. And here's a letter, it's number 2, to the abbess of Shinryuji. She probably wrote to Bassui, how can I become a Buddha? We don't have her letter, but Bassui starts out, in order to become a Buddha, you must discover who it is that wants to become a Buddha. To know this subject, you must right here and now probe deeply into yourself, inquiring, what is it that thinks in terms of good and bad, that sees, that hears? What is it? Oh, or mu, or just looking, inquiring, without searching for brainy answers. If you question yourself profoundly in this wise, you will surely enlighten yourself. If you enlighten yourself, you're instantly a Buddha. The mind which the Buddhas realized in their enlightenment is the mind of all sentient beings. The substance of this mind is pure, harmonizing with its surroundings, not separate from its surroundings. It includes the surroundings. It embraces them. Without doing it, it is so. In a woman's body, it has no female form. In a man's body, it has no appearance of male. It is not mean even in the body of the lowly, nor is it imposing in the body of the noble. Like boundless space, it hasn't a particle of anything. The physical world can be destroyed, but formless, colorless space is indestructible. This mind, like space, is all-embracing. It does not come into existence with the creation of our body, nor does it perish with its disintegration. How does one know that? Is that something that can be known? When the body disintegrates, then where is the knower? Doesn't the knower die with the body? The knower is the brain. And yet, this is said and said. Is there something to it? doesn't come into existence with the creation of our body, nor does it perish with its disintegration. Don't just take it over. What is it? What is it when there's no body, no mind? No anxiety about the body, no fear of pain. A mind that's not afraid of being totally unoccupied. Though invisible, it suffuses our body, and every single act of seeing, hearing, smelling, speaking, or moving the hands and legs is simply the activity of this mind. Mind you, words are not the thing, and yet one does try to express something in words, which nonetheless is inexpressible. Language itself is already dualistic in its very nature. Or isn't it? Whoever searches for Buddha and truth outside this mind is deluded. We say that so quickly, we don't even hear it anymore. And we don't act on it, because we search for Buddha outside of mind. Rather than looking, who is this searcher? And why do I search? What's my motive? I gotta find out. Not say I don't need to know my motives. Baloney. You do. We do. We have to see them. And if there are none, then nothing is seen. Then it's clear. But if they're there, I want to know what impels me and not kid myself and others. Whoever directly perceives that his intrinsic nature is precisely that of a Buddha is himself a Buddha. There's never been a Buddha who has not realized this mind, and every last being within the 6 realms of existence is perfectly endowed with it. Again, this is tricky language, endowed with it. Can see into it, the seeing into it being that true mind. Or else you're looking for something inside that you're endowed with. In Christianity, it's the soul or the divine spark, the Atman in Hinduism. The Buddha precisely declared that there's nothing, nothing. No soul, nothing within. And nothing that transmigrates. That's Hindu speculation or Hindu religion. And yet we're already traveling along in that pattern of thinking. I'm going to be reborn. Hopefully as such and such. Well, it's also sort of a consolation. I don't have to look what's going on right now, how I'm living right now. The words of a sutra, quote, "In Buddha there is no discrimination," unquote, confirms this. Actually, the quote doesn't confirm anything. You're seeing something confirms it to yourself. And then whether you can convince someone else or not is a different story. Actually, you can't convince anybody. You shouldn't try to. It's up to everyone to see, and everyone has that capacity. Or do we? Don't we? You don't know. Although, in a sesshin, in a hard-working sesshin like this, there's sparks of glimpses here and there, insights to something one has never glimpsed before. Something so hard to put into words. Some feeling of wholeness, some absence of division. Which is indescribable. Everyone who has realized this mind and attained to Buddhahood wants to make it known to mankind. It doesn't say here needs to vow to make it known. It comes naturally. Because there's no separation. There's deep understanding of conflict and sorrow. Self-made pain. But men clinging stupidly to superficial forms find it hard to believe in this purposeless Dharmakaya. Dharmakaya is this body of truth, this pure, true Buddha. Purposeless. To give it a name, Buddhas resort to such metaphors as treasure gem of free will, great path, Amitabha Buddha, Buddha of supreme knowledge, Jizo, Kanon, Fugen, one's face before one's parents were born, etc. Every epithet of a Buddha or Bodhisattva is simply a different designation for this one mind. Thus, in a sutra we read, the three worlds are but one mind. Outside this mind, nothing exists. Mind, Buddha, and sentient beings are one. They are not to be differentiated. Since the sutras deal only with this mind, to realize it is to accomplish at one stroke the reading and understanding of all the sutras. One sutra says, the teachings of the sutras are like a finger pointing to the moon. Pointing to the moon is pointing to the one mind of sentient beings. Just as it is said that the moon shines upon both sides of this earth, in the same way one mind illumines the inner and the outer world. When it is said then that great merit can be derived from reciting the sutras, this means what has just been said and nothing more. And it says on the bottom, on the footnote, namely that the sutras say that they themselves are not the truth, but are like an arrow pointing to the truth. The symbol is not what it symbolizes. Again, it is said that through services for the Buddha, one can attain Buddhahood. But to attain Buddhahood simply means to realize this mind. Thus, the merit of realizing this one mind in a single-minded instant is infinitely greater than that of reciting the sutras for 10,000 days, just as perceiving one's own mind in a moment of single-mindedness is incomparably greater than hearing for 10,000 years why this is so. Shakyamuni Buddha underwent many austerities, yet failed to attain Buddhahood. After this, he did Zazen for 6 years, giving up everything else, and at last realized this one mind. Following his enlightenment, he spoke about the mind that he had realized for the sake of all mankind. These talks are called sutras, and they are the words flowing from the realized mind of the Buddha. To realize this mind, I'm skipping something here, you must do Zazen. How you practice is of utmost importance. You must penetrate your koan to the very core. This is how Bassui worked. There were others like Dogen who had no koan. Buddha had no koan. But he had a question, a driving question. What is human sorrow? Where does it come from? How does it originate? And can it come to an end? The foundation of every koan is one's own mind, and nothing else. May have little historical settings of China, the way people lived then, the legends they had, reference to some sutras or bodhisattvas. But fundamentally, foundation of every koan is one's mind. It's as simple as that. The deep yearning for the realization of mind we call desire for truth or thirst for realization. There was a bodhisattva who attained enlightenment by concentrating intently on every sound he heard. So Shakyamuni Buddha called him Kanon. Footnote says Kanon is a simplification of Kanzeon, which means hearer of the cries of the world. In another book, it says kan means seeing, but hearing and seeing are not two, as you can find out for yourself. Seeing the cries of the world is hearing them. If you would know the substance of the mind, Buddha, the very instant you hear a sound, search for this one who hears. Thus you will unfailingly come to the realization that your own mind is no different from Kanon's. Which means at such an instant an outflow of love. And compassion. Which has no purpose we'll end here for today. The four vows.
All beings without number.
I vow to liberate endless blind passions. I vow to uproot dharma gates beyond measure. I vow to penetrate the great way of Buddha. I vow to attain